If your city collapsed tomorrow, you probably wouldn't notice for years. There'd be no explosion, no enemy at the gates, no dramatic final broadcast. Just slowly, the trash stops getting picked up. The stores have less. Your friends move away. And one morning, you realize the government you grew up with just isn't there anymore. That's how Rome ended. And if you think modern systems are too big to fail that way, you're exactly who this story is for. Everything you've seen about Rome's fall is wrong. Not slightly wrong. Dangerously wrong. Hollywood sells you the dramatic version. Barbarians breaching walls. A civilization burning in one night. It's cinematic. It's satisfying. It's also a lie. At its peak, Rome was everywhere. 75 million people. Roads that survived millennia. An empire so stable, people believed it was eternal. But here's the pattern humans refuse to learn. Permanence is always an illusion, and the illusion dies last. By 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire didn't fall. It just stopped. A commander named Odoacer sent a letter, literally a letter, saying, "We don't need a Western emperor anymore." The imperial crown was shipped east like returned merchandise. No final battle, no last stand, just paperwork. And that's terrifying, because collapse doesn't announce itself. It happens while you're distracted. The real collapse began in 235 AD. Not with barbarians, with something far more familiar. Political chaos. Emperor Alexander Severus was murdered by his own troops. What followed was 50 years of instability. More than 20 emperors, most assassinated. Civil wars drained resources. Plagues killed millions. At one point, the empire split into 3 factions. This is what happens when institutions lose legitimacy. When people stop believing the system works, they stop supporting it. Elites hedge. Regions turn inward. Trust evaporates. Rome survived, but survival isn't recovery. The cracks remained, and once trust is gone, everything becomes harder. Rome's military didn't fail because it weakened. It failed because it adapted. Citizens stopped serving, so Rome outsourced survival. Goths, Franks, Vandals, soldiers fighting for pay, not purpose. When you outsource core functions, you lose control. If you're still here, you've probably noticed something. This isn't ancient history. It's a playbook. Rome's money stopped working. Coins carried less silver. Prices rose. Taxes followed. Ordinary people collapsed first. Farmers failed. Freedom was traded for protection. The rich insulated themselves. The middle class disappeared. Every collapse follows this pattern. Infrastructure failed. Slowly, quietly. Bridges collapsed. Grain stopped arriving. Markets emptied. People adapted to decline. They normalized it, until no one remembered what normal felt like. Then came 410 AD. Rome was sacked. For 8 centuries, no enemy had entered the city. Now they walked its streets. Confidence died. Hope evaporated. By the time invasion came, Rome was already exhausted. Starving citizens opened the gates themselves because conquest felt kinder than survival. In 476 AD, a boy emperor was removed. No execution, no burning city, just administration, paperwork, efficiency. Collapse isn't a moment, it's a process. For ordinary people, collapse felt confusing. Cities shrank, opportunities vanished. Children inherited a poorer world. Within generations, civilization became memory. In the East, Rome survived, adapted, evolved. Proof that collapse isn't inevitable. But pressure never disappears. Empires don't die in flames. They fade in habits, deferred maintenance, lost confidence. Rome's fall was slow, boring, worse than the stories. If you never notice the small losses, the big ones will shock you. If you want to understand collapse before you live through it, subscribe, because history doesn't just tell us what happened, it warns us what's coming. But there's something even more unsettling about Rome's collapse. Most people living through it never realized they were living through the end of an empire. Think about that. Generations were born, lived entire lives, and died during what historians now call the fall of Rome. But to them, it was just life getting harder. A bridge collapses, people find another road. Grain shipments arrive late, families eat less, taxes rise, farmers abandon land, cities shrink. Each change is small, each adjustment feels temporary. And because humans adapt incredibly well, the decline becomes invisible. This is called normalization of decline. When a system slowly deteriorates, people adjust their expectations. What once felt unacceptable gradually becomes normal. Reliable water becomes occasional water. Safe roads become dangerous roads. Stable governments become unstable governments. And each generation inherits a slightly weaker world. But because they never experienced the original version, they don't realize anything is missing. That's how civilizations disappear. Not through catastrophe, through gradual forgetting. There's another pattern historians often overlook. Collapse rarely happens evenly. Some places decline rapidly. Others continue functioning almost normally. Even while Rome was weakening, some provinces were still prosperous. Trade continued. Markets operated. Cities remained active, which meant people living there had no reason to believe the empire was ending. From their perspective, everything still worked. This uneven collapse created a dangerous illusion, because as long as some parts of the system function, people assume the whole system is stable. But systems don't fail everywhere at once. They fail node by node, region by region, institution by institution, until one day the remaining pieces can no longer support the whole. And that's exactly what happened to Rome. Well, first the economy weakened, then the political system fractured, then the military became unstable, then infrastructure failed, then food supplies collapsed. Each crisis made the next one worse. Each solution created new vulnerabilities. This is called a cascade failure, a chain reaction where every problem multiplies the next. By the time people recognized the pattern, it was already too late. History books often focus on emperors and battles, but the real story of collapse happens far away from palaces. In small farms, in shrinking towns, in markets where fewer goods arrive every year. Parents watching their children inherit fewer opportunities. Merchants seeing trade routes disappear. Farmers abandoning land their families worked for generations. This is what the fall of Rome actually looked like. Not flames, not epic battles, just slow erosion. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If collapse looks like this, how would we recognize it today? Would we see it immediately? Or would it appear exactly the same way it did in Rome? Services becoming unreliable, institutions losing trust, economic pressure rising, infrastructure aging faster than it's repaired. Small changes, gradual adjustments, normalizing decline. Rome teaches us something profound. Civilizations don't collapse because people are stupid. They collapse because complex systems are fragile, and the larger a system becomes, the harder it is to maintain. Rome lasted centuries, longer than most civilizations in history, yet even it couldn't escape the pressures that eventually break every system. But here's the most fascinating part. Even after the Western Empire disappeared, life didn't simply stop. Cities continued, trade continued, local governments continued. People adapted, they always do. But the world they lived in was smaller, poorer, less connected, less stable. And within a few generations, the memory of Rome's greatness began to fade. Massive aqueducts stood abandoned. Roads crumbled into dirt paths. Libraries vanished. Knowledge disappeared. Not destroyed, just forgotten. And that's the real tragedy of Rome. Not that it collapsed, but that humanity lost centuries of progress simply because the system holding it together failed.